guys, welcome to the Radiate Your Faith podcast. My name is Maddie Walco, and I'm a college softball player from the great state of Texas. And I'm so excited that you are tuning into the Radiate Your Faith podcast, where I hope you are encouraged to let the light of Christ shine through you in a way that allows people to see God through the way that you walk with Him. My prayer for you is that your faith is deepened, that it is strengthened, and that you are encouraged to radiate your faith. Hey guys, welcome to the Radiate Your Faith podcast. I'm so excited that you guys are joining me for this week's episode. This week, I have on a very special guest, and I'm going to go ahead and let her introduce herself to you guys.
Hi, I'm Lainey. I play softball here at Angelo State, and that is where I got to meet Keisha at, and yeah.
Yes, Keisha, to those of you who know me through softball, Maddie, to those of you who know me through the podcast. It's a long story. But yes, we did get to meet through the Angelo State. I've been trying to get Lainey on the podcast for the entire school year, which has been a struggle, but we finally got this girl on the podcast. And I'm so excited to have her on. But before we get started, guys, I want to ask Lainey a question. And I've been asking this question all season, but the question is, who is somebody in your life who radiates Christ?
Someone in my life that radiates Christ would have to be more than likely my best friend, Taylor. She's guided me so much. We've been in each other's lives for since pre-K, and she's someone that I've always looked up to and who has guided me down the right paths no matter what, and who has always been there for me no matter what. And yeah, so I would say probably her out of anyone.
I love Taylor, guys. You guys have not seen her on the podcast yet, which we'll have to get her on here.
Yes, we do.
But I met her because I went to College Station with Lainey over, was it Halloween weekend?
Yes.
We went over Halloween weekend. I went to see my best friend Tori, which you guys have seen on the podcast, and she went to see Taylor. And Taylor is just this big ray of sunshine. And so we'll have to get her on here, but she definitely is somebody who radiates Christ. Okay, so today's episode is going to be all about God's timing for seasons in our lives. And I think this is such a good topic to talk about because there is always a season that God has us in, and He's always teaching us and stuff, and He's always there with us. So why did you choose this to be our topic for today?
This topic has been something that I have truly dug into and really have started to focus on, as it is a big part of where I'm at today and what I do now. And it would have to be just God's timing and what He has done with it in my life and the things that His timing has brought me to out of the worst parts of my life, and getting to look back on it and just be like, wow, He was there the entire time, no matter if I didn't see it. If I felt like He wasn't there, I look back and I'm like, dang, He was there the whole entire time. He had it all planned out so perfectly. And that's something that I feel like a lot of us need to focus on, that no matter where you're at, what you're doing, that He is in the moment. And if you don't see it right then and there, you'll end up seeing it at one point.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think that's something we forget a lot as Christians is we let our eyes be our faith a lot, and we let our circumstances be our faith sometimes, and those are going to fail us. The Bible says that over and over again, our eyes fail us, but Jesus doesn't. And so I think exactly what you said, trusting God with the timing of everything, the seasons of life, that's so important. So do you want to start out by sharing your story as to how God has been teaching you this?
Yes. So one of my main parts of my biggest one that I looked back on and I see constantly and that I always revert back to during the hardest times is a time in my life when sorry, when I lost one of my best friends in my life. I like to look back on that time because it was one of the hardest points in my life and one of my biggest struggles. And losing people at such a young age is super hard because that's not something you expect to see. People our age, just being gone in an instant. And during that time of my life, God had placed someone in my life a year before this, and that person had gone through the same exact thing. And at that point in my life, where I could have easily went down a path of struggle and hurt and straying away from God and not wanting any part of it, thinking that, why would you do this? Why this? Why that? Where I could have gone down that path. He provided someone in my life that came with more people at the end of the day, to guide me back to him. And God's always been like a big part of my life, but I've never truly had a relationship. Like I knew God, but I didn't know God. And I didn't have that relationship with him. And so during this time, he provided someone in my life that I am forever thankful for, that instead of letting me get led down the wrong path, he led me down the path to get to know him. And during that time, I obviously did not see that. That was like the least of what I even thought of. But now looking back is like God provided this person in my life for that certain amount of time to guide me back to him and grow a relationship with him through like one of the hardest times in my life. And how perfect his timing is in placing people in your life at certain times for your needs. And it's just it's so very cool to see that his timing is truly so perfect. And like so many people say that, but when you look back, it's like, wow, like I could have been in a totally different situation, but he placed that in my life during the most hardest time that could have led me to a whole different outlook on where I'm at.
And that's God's grace, right?
Yes.
Like providing people along the way to help guide you in your hardest parts of your life. And I think it's in those moments where it's hard and God does things in our lives that we're just like, why? Like I don't understand, Lord. Like I think we forget so often his promises to us, like the promise of in Romans 8:28. And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good. And it's in those moments where we're so focused on the one thing going on in our life that is hard and hurtful and scary that we forget just how good God is, how much of a redeemer God is, and how he uses every little detail of our life, every hardship for our good and for his glory.
Yes.
And I think your story and just what you had to go through is just evidence of that. Even with softball, do you want to talk about that too?
Yes. Well, last year, it was a hard time, my freshman year here, and I struggled a lot through softball, through outside of softball, school, and just friends, and so much more. I struggled a lot through every single part of that. And to look back, I was struggling to the point to where like I was starting to lead myself away and find worldly desires that filled me for that time being, the happiness that wasn't going to last and the temporary happiness that was just being like made throughout that time. And it led me to a point to where I didn't think softball was it for me anymore. And I told myself the lie of just, this isn't for you anymore, this isn't where you need to be, this is not who you are, and you shouldn't be where you're at right now. And I got to the point to where like I was like, no, you know what? I'm done. Like there's no way I'm coming back. No way. And I told myself I was done. I was like, I'm not gonna go through that again. There's nothing good gonna come out of it. I just want to proceed with my life outside of it and see where it takes me. Well, then I ended up coming back, and I had no idea why I was coming back. I stressed about it through the whole summer. I was like, why am I doing this? Why am I going back for another year of this? Like, I don't see a reason why or whatever. And we ended up having 10 new girls come into the team, being one of them. And and we had so many new girls come into the team that just brought so much light with them and so much Christ and like shining God's light throughout them, that reminded me of the reason of why I came back, which at the time I was like, why? God, why are you like, why am I coming back to this? Why did I say yes to this? Like, this is not what I want. This is not what I need. But at that point in time, it's not what you want and what you need. It's God's plan for you. He's already set that out for you. And to come back to this year and see where it has led me with y'all and bringing me closer to him, that I couldn't have done probably anywhere else as perfect that is here. And I see that as such perfect timing for God again, that he is just like, through a time where I'm like, no, there's no way. There's no way it's going to get any better. There's like, There's no way it's going to happen. And then here we are with all these new amazing people that I was able to meet as my teammates that have continually guided me closer to God in ways that I feel like I've strayed away last year, being like where I was with the temporary happiness that God didn't have for me. But I learned so much from it to make me where I am now. And He has provided me with so many more people and so many great teammates that have continually pressed me towards Him that I never saw ever to happen. So I feel like there's another representation of His timing that He has had for me in my life, of another big one where I never thought it could get any better, to where He was like, just wait, like the plan is there, it's perfect, I have it set for you. And to see that where I'm at now is absolutely amazing, and it's great to see. And it's another great reminder of who He is and how great He is and what He does for us.
Yeah, and I've shared this story on the podcast before, but there was this story of like whenever I was like trying to figure out like where I want to go for college,
Yes.
I went to this Christmas party and we did like a sock exchange thing. It was kind of weird, but we did this game where you had to like pass the socks like right or left based off the story, right? And if you guys already watched the podcast, sorry, I'm repeating the story, but it's just it's so applicable to this. When we were playing this game, there was this box I really wanted, and it had like puppies on it. It was so cute. Cutest puppy box ever. And I was like, I want that box. And so we were trying to pass it back and forth, and I literally had it like in my hands, and I was like, yes, like I'm getting this puppy box. And then they said like something to the right one more time, and I was like, no, like I had the puppy box in my hands. It's the one I wanted, right? And so I ended up getting this like super dingy red torn up bag. And I was like, of course I would get the dingy torn up bag. And I'm like, oh. So it's kind of like slowly opening mine, watching the girl next to me open up her cute puppy box, right? And she pulls out these super ugly like toe socks. And I was like, what? Like gross, right? I was like, oh, well, I guess I'll look and see what's in my dingy red bag, right? And I pull out these super nice Columbia socks. And I was like, oh, what? Are you serious?
Wait a minute.
And then I had this like, boom, God moment where He was like, that is recruiting. Like what I was going through at the time. Like what I learned in that moment was like, sometimes we just see the outside. We see the pretty stuff, right? And so we're like, I want that, right? But God truly knows what's like inside the box, right? Like what's going to happen at whatever place. And so for me, I felt like, not to say again that Angelo's a dingy red bag, it's not. But from the outside looking in my recruiting process, this other school was this big, pretty puppy box.
Yes.
And I was like, I want the puppy box. But I could feel the Lord saying, no, I have something better for you than you would choose for yourself. And that's exactly what happened with here. Like as soon as we got here, it was just like the Lord entered the picture. And it was just like, boom, like 8 girls got baptized in like, what, like a month of being here?
Yes, not
like
even.
It's one of those things where we really have to take a step back and realize that God is a perfect author for our story, that He's going to pick better for us, and He's going to replace what we lose, right? Like whenever I found Christ, I was going through a really hard time in my life. One of my friends almost committed suicide. I lost all of my friends because of an incident with an ex-boyfriend. Everything was just falling apart.
Yes.
And I didn't understand why. Like, why? But God replaced those things. He redeemed those things in the right time. And I think in talking about this, it's hard not to talk about Ecclesiastes, right?
I know,
like,
yes.
We were talking about like Ecclesiastes 3, but there's a part in Ecclesiastes, and it's one of my favorite verses of all time. And it says that He's made everything beautiful in its time. And I think so often we want to choose our timeline for things. We want to choose our story for things, but it can only be made beautiful in its time. And even in the psalm I read this morning, I think it was Psalm 75. I'm not sure. I read it this morning, but it talks about how God chooses the appointed time. Like we convince ourselves that we're choosing, but really like God does, and we just have to take a step of obedience to walk into what He calls us to, right? So in sharing all of that, I guess like my concluding point is like in Lainey's story, and even just in the hands of seeing in my own life, like God is always working things together for good, and there's always a reason and a season for things, which just takes us back to Ecclesiastes. Do you want to talk about that verse and like how that has affected your perspective on just the seasons that you're in?
Yes. So honestly, when I was going through, because I'm like, okay, this is the topic that I want to talk about. This is what I want to do. And I'm like, I want to find the verses that I used during my times of like learning and during the times of trying to figure it all out of where his timing was at the point. And I ended up flipping across Ecclesiastes again today and not too long ago, 3, where I have it written in there. When I first got this Bible, it was one of the first things because I know with my little purple marker that I used when I first got it, and I have it in there over like the whole section of your season will change.
Mm-hmm.
And I really stuck by that. And it really just, it hits me hard every time because like when you're in those seasons, you're like, okay, I mean, will it change and
Mm-hmm.
everything? And he has so much in there that's just providing great information with how it changes and what it will do. And I was gonna, yeah. And I just love it, like in this part and where it just, he lists out just there's an occasion for everything and a time for every activity under heaven. And it just gives you just list after list of a time to do this, a time to do this, a time to do this. It's never just a time for one specific thing in your life. There's always a time for every single detail you go through during your life. And just exactly what you said is he has made everything appropriate in its
Mm-hmm.
time.
Mm-hmm.
There's never, and that's another thing that happens to struggle with a lot of people is it's like, this person is so far ahead of me. This person's doing this person is doing
Mm-hmm.
this. And something
Sure.
I've really stuck to is like, there's no time limit on the way God works through you.
Mm-hmm.
There's no time limit of when you need to find God. There's no time limit of when he does certain things in your life. Like everyone has their own created path that he has created for you and your specific self. He has your own plan and everything set up for you to where your timing is going to be completely different than maybe the person next to you or the person that you see and you're like, wow, like I would love to be in that. But it's not the point of anything is like making yourself be like, wow, I want to be that
Mm-hmm.
instead of focusing on no, he has my timing for when it is due and when he has set it. And that timing is going to be more perfect than you could ever think of, like I said. And I think it's just very awesome just the way he's just so great in
Mm-hmm.
everything he does. And he's never just gonna walk away from you because he has a specific timing for you and you're not just pushed to the side on anything.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I love that you shared about the fact that like your seasons are not going to be the person's next to you. And I
Mhm.
think like a lot of times when we're waiting for things, we like to compare, like you said,
Yes.
we like to like, oh,
Yes.
well, look at what God's doing in that girl's life.
Mhm.
Why isn't he doing it in mine?
Yes.
Instead of looking at it and being like, wow, God did that in her life. He could do that in
In
mine.
mine. Like,
Like
whoa.
we kind of like warp it to where it becomes more self-seeking rather than
Mhm.
selfless for him. And even in saying that, I wanted to add this too. It says, in Ecclesiastes 3:14, it says, I know that everything God does will endure forever. Nothing can be added to it, and nothing can be taken away from it. And I think in sharing that, we can also remember like God's plan will prevail,
Yes.
but also you cannot change God's timing
No.
for your life, no matter how much you try to speed it up, no matter how much you try to slow things down. Like God's will prevail.
Mhm.
And not to say like I think sometimes too when we get in knowing that we're like,
Yes.
well then why would I even pray about it, right?
Mhm.
And then I would encourage you to go look at First Samuel when Hannah's praying for a baby. Like she asked God for a child because she was waiting for one.
Yes.
And God heard her prayer and he said that he accepted her prayer and he blessed her with Samuel,
Mhm.
which Samuel means because I asked the Lord. Like that should be encouragement to us to bring that to him when we're waiting for things, but also recognize that we can't speed up or slow down what God has for us. And we have to find contentment and true satisfaction and true joy in the circumstances that God has placed us in.
Yes. And coming from that, it has it also right here in Ecclesiastes 3 where it says whatever is has already been and whatever will already is.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's so cool just like also looking at the past is like, wow. I wish I would have done things different, but it's like that already is what has happened, but you never know what God is also going to have for you in the future. Just
Mm-hmm.
like I didn't know at those times like God had anything just as amazing as he has now in my future, as of the future of now from then. And so like where I settle now is like I struggle just like everyone else. I struggle every day with it sometimes, and I look back and I'm like, he already did this for me. Like he's not gonna just give up and be like, there you go,
Mhm.
that's your only like way to like figure it out. He's not gonna do that. He's gonna continue to like guide you through other circumstances to where like you're feeling down, and it's like don't don't dwell on that because he's always going to have something better coming from it,
Mhm.
because what he gives you to struggle with could also be someone's blessing later on that you give them.
It's true. It's true. And I even think in sharing that, I think about how there's a lot of times where we also allow like our faith to be like our past almost in a
Yes,
sense. Like we'll be
yes.
like, well, it didn't work out last time. So like
Hmm.
how am I supposed to believe for it now? But
Yes.
but what we forget is that the things that happened in the past literally have no power over what
Mhm.
God can do in the future for you.
No.
And it's one of those things where you really have to humble yourself and let go of holding on to things that, again, you can see and look at more so who God is and what He is capable of doing in your life. Um, and yeah, so
No matter where you're at, I mean, your season can always change. No matter if you think there's no way it can change. There's times, like even right now, that struggle is happening, but like no matter what, he's going to use that to
mm,
glorify him in a way that you'll never know and you'll never see until it happens. And
mm,
if you don't see it in the moment, you will end up seeing it as you look back. And I
yeah.
think that's just as amazing.
Yeah, and you have to believe for it.
Yes.
There's a song called Silence by I think they're called Jaywalker Worship. I don't
Hmm.
know. And it talks about how it literally says, even in the silence, Jesus, you're working and I believe it. And I think that's kind of one of those things where that's what the kind of
Hmm.
faith we have to have in going into our different seasons of our life. So I love that.
Yes.
Thank you so much for being on the
Yes.
podcast. This has been
Yes.
a long time coming, guys. But yeah, so I hope you guys were encouraged by some of the things we shared. Take the time to read through Ecclesiastes 3. Like if you are in a
Yes.
season where you don't understand what God is doing, read through Ecclesiastes 3. And even one of my favorite books in the Bible is Habakkuk, which let me find it here. In Habakkuk 1, okay, just read Habakkuk 2, I guess. Read both. But in Habakkuk 1 it says like, how long, Lord, must I call for help? And then it says, this is like God's answer to Habakkuk. He says, look at the nations and watch and be utterly amazed, for I'm going to do something in your days that you would not believe, even if told. And I think that is just like the best encouragement of like God is going to do something in your life that is good. You just have to be patient and wait for it. But yeah, read those two things. So anyways, I hope you guys love this podcast. Don't forget to check us out on Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, at the Radiate Your Faith website where we got some merch for you guys. But I hope you guys really love this podcast and that you guys were encouraged to radiate your faith.